Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our Zoom live stream with me and David Uwe for what I hope will be an interesting and fun conversation for the next hour in honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. My name is Bonnie Powell, and I'm an 87 Wayman Mary alum and a board member on the APIM Alumni Advisory Board. I'm here with David Uwe, a 1993 Wayman Mary alum and a 96 MBA alum. We're in a conference room courtesy of McGuire Woods Law Firm in Washington, D.C., just a few blocks from the White House. I would like to introduce David here, who graduated with a Fine and Studio Arts Art History undergraduate degree and then an MBA. He was an inaugural recipient of the Wayman Mary Asian American Centennial Award in 2022. He was recently the founding executive director of the Chinese American Museum in Washington, D.C. on 16th Street. And as of last week, he is now the current chief operating officer of the Friends, I'm going to read this, of the Friends of the National Asian Pacific American Museum, which is working hard to bring a new Smithsonian museum to the D.C. Mall in the next few years. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure. For those of you watching this evening, please feel free to submit questions via Q&A, and we will do our best to answer a few of those near the end of our talk. Thank you again, David, for being with us. I was going to jump right in with a question. Why don't you tell us about your big news, the new museum that we hope is coming to the National Mall?
Yes, so in 2022, Representative Grace Mung from New York, she put a bill out in Congress to do an exploration for a national Asian Pacific American museum on the mall. There are many other museums like the African American Museum, and there's an upcoming Latino museum and a women's museum. And that bill was signed by Biden in 2022. And what that bill is to do an exploration. So it's a study by an independent bipartisan commission to propose the museum on the mall. So it's still a very much of a long game, but there's a lot of things that have to happen right now. Our organization, Friends, is supporting that effort by supporting the commission, this 8-person nonpartisan commission that is putting together a report to Congress, which we hope will go to Congress at the end of 2025.
Oh, wow.
Right.
It is quite the long game, isn't it?
Yeah. And so we would hope that the report in 2025 would then lead to authorization around 2027. Usually it has to be shopped around quite a bit.
Right.
And then possibly breaking ground for the museum in 2034. Wow. Sounds like a long time.
Right.
It sounds like a long timetable, but it is very aggressive.
Right, and you're very busy.
Yeah, especially, building support and raising money, not just for the museum itself, but for the process to get there.
Right. And you actually already have experience starting museums. You were a founding member of the Chinese American Museum here in DC. Can you tell us a little about that?
So in 2017, a couple of our future board members got together with an idea to build a museum. At the time, they weren't even quite firm on what kind of museum there was going to be. But at some point in the process, it was suggested to build a Chinese American museum, a museum that focused on Chinese in America. So an American history museum, an American story museum. And at the time, I had my own PR firm, and I caught wind that this museum was coming together. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do some work pro bono. And so I started drawing up a lot of plans and ideas, and I just went too far. So I ended up becoming the executive director.
They decided to hire you because you'd done so much work.
Right. At some point, they started calling me the executive director, so I guess it just stuck. But I did that for 6 years. And so, that museum is still a young museum.
Right.
It's still in development.
Right.
But it's right here at 16th and M.
Yeah.
Just
It's a
a few
beautiful
blocks
building
from the
too.
White House. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it. So let's talk about your background a little bit. I know your mother was Italian from the Bronx, and your father is Chinese American. Would
Yep.
you tell us a little about them?
Well, their story. My father is actually Chinese, born and raised in the Philippines. He went to medical school in the Philippines and came to New York, to Jamaica, Queens.
Wow.
And my mother was a nurse there. It sounds like the beginning of some kind of sitcom story. But and then so I was young in New York City, but we moved down to Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's where my father and his cousin, who's the same kind of physician, opened up a medical practice.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
I grew up in an area where there weren't too many Chinese, but
Right.
there were a lot of Filipinos because of the Navy
Right,
in that area.
exactly. Yes.
So I think my father and his cousin, my uncle, felt a certain level of comfort in creating, like, injecting themselves into the
Right.
community there. So, so, I grew up with, as a mixed identity.
Right.
I wasn't really around, except for my cousins, who, from my uncle's family. There really weren't too many Chinese at the time. It's really changed a lot down there.
Right.
But my cousins in New Jersey and New York, they were going to Chinese school, but
Right, but there
I
wasn't
was
a
not.
Chinese school
There's
in
no
Virginia
Chinese
Beach?
school, and Chinese was not spoken in the home because my mother is Italian.
Okay, right.
So
right.
I wouldn't say my early childhood, maybe even into my teens, I wouldn't say I had a really strong Asian self-identity. It really wasn't until I was older that I started becoming more interested
Right.
in my own heritage.
Right.
I would say even the same for my father. He came here in '66, so this is right after the Civil Rights Act and the
Right.
Immigration Act.
Right.
And I think at that time, if you're an immigrant, you probably really felt a strong urge to assimilate.
Right.
I don't think he really thought too much about teaching me the language or talking about the culture. Now my father's 85,
Right.
and every single one of our conversations is it's about
Oh, wow.
Chinese culture. Yeah. But I think now he reflects on his own heritage, and he's I've been very fortunate to have these two positions now that
Right.
really celebrate being Asian.
Right. Well, it must be interesting when you were growing up. Like, what kinds of traditions did you have in your family? Was there like a mixture, or, I mean, was it more Italian food that was eaten in the house?
Well, the two cultures that really center around food. My mother, who's recently passed away, she was an incredible cook.
Oh,
And so she
wow.
learned how to cook a lot of Asian dishes.
She did.
And good friends of ours in town owned one of the few Chinese restaurants in the area. So, so I was never too detached from the cuisine.
Right. Well, that's
But,
good.
when I was pretty young, I had several opportunities to go to Asia and visit with my family.
Okay.
My Chinese family is originally from Xiamen, which is in Fujian province, sort of across the water
From Hong
from
Kong?
Taiwan.
Oh, from
Yeah,
Taiwan.
from Taiwan,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a little further north.
Right.
But
Wow.
it's a interesting time because I think now we're in an era where people are talking more openly about their heritage.
Right. Right.
Our alma mater, William and Mary. When I went there undergrad, and I'm sure this is the same for you, there was no Asian studies program.
They didn't.
There was.
Yeah.
I don't even think there was an Asian students group.
I don't think there was.
And so I was down there. I guess it's 2022.
Well, you were
for
there for the Centennial Award,
this Asian
actually.
Centennial, and I kind of thought it was just going to be a conference room talking about
Right.
the
Right.
Asian heritage and the history of William and Mary's Asian students. I am driving down Jamestown Road, and there are all these banners going down the
Wow.
road that says the William and Mary Asian Centennial. I cannot believe it.
Yeah.
It really was kind of a moving moment for me,
Mm-hmm.
because you think about how far we've come in
Right.
terms of that being something that the university would really focus on and
Would
and
embrace.
embrace and
Right.
invest in.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was I really it was a great event, but just knowing that William and Mary was committing so much,
Right.
that
Right.
that was really really something else.
Right. Yeah. So when you were at William and Mary, you're saying that there weren't a lot of other Asian Americans that you recall, or
I
did you
wouldn't
have a
say I
couple of
didn't see
friends
other
maybe?
Asian students, but I think there was no place,
There's no organized
there was no
group,
place to
really.
really,
Right.
exercise your heritage.
Right.
And,
Right.
yeah,
No, I had the same
yeah.
experience.
I mean, there are a lot of parallels. You think
Right.
about LGBTQ movement,
Right.
from when we were undergrads. I mean, it's amazing
How it's
how
changed
things,
over
and some of
time.
that is the information age. Some of that
Right.
is seeing like people in the media and
Right.
in, entertainment.
Right.
So,
Right. Let's see.
so my wife also went to William and Mary. We met when she was a freshman and I was a junior,
Okay.
older man, and we we lived in Williamsburg until '98. I went to business school and she went
Right.
to law school there.
Right.
So we've been there 4 times.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and my wife works in civil rights, employment law,
Oh, she
yeah, and
does.
DEI.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny, I was in marketing and advertising for so long, but now we've kind of come full circle where we both are working on
Right.
similar and related topics.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'm gonna shift us a little bit. I wanted to ask about Asian Americans and how they were viewed during the COVID pandemic. And we're talking about, we went back in time, going back to our William and Mary times, and coming to the COVID pandemic and everything that happened. Obviously, there's been shifts, but what do you think has been sort of like the effect of expanding? I'm using the word representation. I mean, times are changing, right? So, do you have any thoughts about like just? I mean, you're working in the museums, the Chinese American Museum. How do you think sort of Asian Americans are viewed sort of today in this
Yeah.
country? Like where are
First
we
of all, I'll
at?
just point out that we are the fools that tried to launch a museum during the pandemic.
Right, right.
But yeah, I think that without getting too political, I think the whole COVID pandemic was very politicized.
Right.
And I think, part of a playbook of politics is to make someone an enemy.
Right, right.
To
Someone's the bad
so then you
guy.
could focus on.
Right.
And that's quite unfortunate, of course. And it really you really saw the rise of a lot of anti-Asian hate.
Right.
Not too dissimilar to anti-Middle Eastern
Right.
sentiment.
Right.
I always think of right after 9/11, there was an Afghani restaurant in Georgetown where someone broke their whole glass front.
Oh, yeah.
And the sidebar is that the community came together and rebuilt it. But it's amazing how people cannot see the fact that these people that live with you, live in your town, are Americans just like you.
Right. Right.
But the pandemic did bring a lot of Asian hate and violence, and at least that did help bring the issues of discrimination to light. But
Right.
you know, a lot of people really suffered,
Right.
and I think that's still the case, even you know, as the pandemic has you know, diminished.
Right. 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 Let's see. Kind of like going right through this.
And then one thing about the pandemic, you know, we lost the a real great warrior for Asian American visibility and representation. It was a photographer, Corky Lee, and he actually passed away during the pandemic of COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I know even the outing that he went on where he caught it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on the phone with me and he said, David, he's a real gregarious person. He said, David, I have to go, which is usually you don't hear that too often from Corky Lee because he's a real talker. But he said, I have to go. I'm going to follow the guardian angels around the New York subway because they're looking for someone that committed a hate crime or something like that. And I said, well, be careful. And
Yeah.
a week later, he caught COVID. And but he is an example of, you know, one of these champions for not just, you know, he's Chinese American, but you know, he was really documenting and giving people visibility from all different Asian cultures. So he, you know, there's I helped curate a show of his photography after he passed away.
Right.
But you know, he was documenting Sikh Americans and Chinese Americans, Korean Americans. He was fond of the centennial, the regular celebrations of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad
Oh, okay.
in Utah.
Where was he based? Was
He was based in New York,
Oh,
but
he
wherever
was,
you
okay.
were, if you were at
Right.
an Asian American event, he was somehow there.
Wow.
But there's a very famous photo that he did not take from the 1860s of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. It's called East Meets West by a photographer named Russell, Andrew Russell. And Corky Lee recreated this photo using the descendants of the Chinese laborers that built the Transcontinental Railroad. So he was always, you know, trying to make a statement about, you know, Asian pride, but Asian visibility. And he wasn't always just taking pictures of events, but just everyday life.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, so,
Trying to highlight the contributions
Right.
that have been made.
so you know, I think that while there's this rise in Asian hate, there was also a rise in people that were trying to counter it with, you know, positive messages, bold messages,
Right.
real
Right.
activism.
Right. Right. So how do you think, I mean, this is maybe a little bit of a deeper question, but can we strike a balance? Like, do you think of like if you think of like maybe your children, like you want to give them their like unique cultural backgrounds, like, you know, traditions, and yet we want everybody to get along too. Like, we're all human beings, we're all world citizens. Like, do you think we're making progress on that?
I think so. I think people are finding their way to celebrate their heritage while not compromising their identity as Americans.
Right.
You know, I think
Right.
that's the ultimate goal. We're not trying to celebrate being Asian American to separate ourselves.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we're trying to highlight the inputs that we bring. You know,
Right.
the long history that we have
Right.
of being American. You know,
Right.
so you know, there are a lot of people that don't want to talk about negative things in history. You know, you have some people saying, you know, this is critical race theory and things
Right,
like
and
that.
rewriting history or maybe ignoring certain
But
things.
I think those people miss the point. We're not trying to disparage America by talking about things that were not right in the past. We're actually trying to make America better
Right.
by talking about where we've come from, the mistakes we've made
Right.
and how we, move forward together.
And can do
And I really do think that there is a way to celebrate heritage
Right.
without compromising,
Right.
your feeling or belief that
Of all being part
yeah,
of like the same
yeah.
sort of.
So when we developed the Chinese American Museum, I think there were a lot of people early on that felt like we're creating a Chinese American museum for Chinese Americans. Yes, that's sort of the
Telling their
low-hanging fruit of,
story, but
people that are going to come to the museum. But more and more, you want people that are Irish American and German American and Latino American to come to that museum and see these Chinese American stories and Chinese American history and say, hey, that's a lot like my family's story.
Right.
That's a lot like my people's story.
Right.
And I think when you make those kind of connections, that's where people can come together.
Right. The
and
common
see,
threads.
Yeah, see the
sort of.
commonality, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Um,
So it's exciting to work on this new proposed museum.
Right.
Because now it's expanding
Right.
to Asian Americans. And, it's a challenge as well because, there are so many different Asian American ethno subgroups. And you want to give all of those groups visibility. You want to
Right.
also talk about some story that has some commonality to it, and
Right.
talks. But it will be an exciting day when that
Yes.
museum happens, and I say when.
Right. Right. So you're doing a day-to-day, like just working as the chief operating officer, right?
Right,
Like for this,
right. So we really have a great team of movers and shakers that are involved. We are trying to raise a substantial amount of money. Once again, not just for the museum to be built,
Right.
but for this whole process
Right.
to support this 8-person bipartisan commission
Right.
that's been appointed by Congress.
Right. Right. It's pretty exciting, actually. I was
Yeah.
actually really excited when I was speaking to you like the other day and you told me about it, and I hadn't heard about it yet. I mean, the last museum I remember in D.C. is the African American Museum, which I actually just visited not that long ago, like in the past year. It was actually very difficult to get into because you had to have timed tickets and that
Yeah,
sort
and
of
I
thing.
think they might be moving away from the time tickets now that the
It's been
museum's
enough
becoming a little
time
more
has
mature.
passed, people
But
see
yeah,
it.
that is a great museum. And what else is great when you go in there? It's not just African Americans going to the museum.
Right.
It's
Right. It's everybody.
people from people that are from even overseas. You want to
Right,
make sure that
right.
they have that kind of story.
Yeah.
But to give you an idea of the timetable, so I believe this is correct.
For that museum, you mean?
When Congress authorized that museum, meaning they said move forward and
Right.
build it,
Right.
because we're not even there yet with our museum. I believe it took another 13 years.
Well, I remember hearing about it, and it did take a long time, but it was so exciting once they had it open. But then you couldn't even get in there. I mean, it was a challenge. So,
Yeah.
so it's very exciting. I mean, I kind of wonder where we might end up with this Asian American.
There are a
museum.
few sites.
Really still.
I guess it's okay for me to say. One of the sites is actually the existing Arts and Industry building.
I love that.
Yeah, it is. But it's been vacant for quite some
It
time.
has,
and
but they just closed it again. They had opened
They
it.
had
and closed
well, they
it.
had a visiting exhibit in there.
Right, right.
Something the future. I
Yes,
saw it a while
yes,
back.
actually,
It was
yeah,
terrific.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's not the largest of the buildings.
Right.
The African American Museum is 440,000 square feet.
It's huge.
The Chinese American Museum is 9,000 square feet.
Wow, yes.
You can fit 50 of those museums.
Right.
But I believe the Arts and Industry Museum's like 250, a little under that.
Okay.
So, it's not a small building.
Right.
It's not a huge building.
Right.
But there are some benefits to
Going into an
rehabbing an
existing-
existing
yeah.
building, yes, because there are a lot of things that, a lot of hoops that you don't necessarily have to jump through.
Right.
So that's just one building.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm not in trouble for mentioning that.
Well,
But,
hopefully not.
We'll edit that out.
So let's talk about Chinatowns. DC's Chinatown. I saw an article, I think it was dated 2021, where they'd asked for your thoughts on Chinatown. I know it's changed dramatically over the years. Can you speak to that a little?
Well, not unlike most Chinatowns across the country, it is shrinking in size.
Right.
The success of the city, if it's noted by more development and new businesses moving in,
Right.
they tend to make rents and real estate prices so high that the local communities cannot survive there.
Right.
So DC's Chinatown moved twice. It was sort of pushed out for first it was pushed out to create Federal Triangle.
Oh, okay.
And then it was moved to create the convention center.
I want to say the MCI, or the convention
Not
center.
the convention center you see now, but its predecessor.
The old one. No, I
Yeah,
do remember
yeah.
that actually, yes.
So, it's easy to go to Chinatown and say, Chinatown's dead. Chinatown's no longer here.
Right.
I've worked with a lot of people over the years that really try to fight back when they hear things like that. Chinatown is certainly not a residential Chinatown anymore.
Right.
Very few people of Asian descent still live there.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it can't be a cultural hub.
Right.
It can't be a place that marks where the Chinatown community thrived and was an important part of this city.
Right.
But realistically, a lot of the Chinese population, Asian population have moved to the suburbs.
Right.
So you have a lot of Korean communities in Northern Virginia. Montgomery County is sort of the new Chinatown.
Right, that's true.
If you want to go to,
I think of Annandale, Virginia, actually.
Yeah.
Right. More Asian.
So there, same with Indian Americans, Southeast Asians. They have different pockets of because not only was there just an exodus to the suburbs, but people just for the same reasons that they developed Chinatowns, they found protection and comfort by creating another community somewhere else.
Right.
So, my father, I remember once I was driving downtown with him and he said, first of all, that Fuddruckers, the Chinese character is backwards.
Oh, no, they did it wrong.
It doesn't even make sense. But, that was something that having Chinese characters on all the buildings there, that was something that the city implemented at some point.
And on the street signs.
Yeah, and there's a certain absurdity to it. But at the same time, if they didn't do that, other than the Friendship Gate, you may
You'd
not
have
even
no
know
idea.
you were in Chinatown.
Right.
So,
Right.
I think you have to look at it as, how do we move forward? How do we preserve some businesses that are still remaining, but also just encourage, it to be like a cultural center?
Right. No, I actually have a story about DC's Chinatown. I remember when I was young, a little girl, with my piano teachers, coming to the Kennedy Center to watch, because it was piano, so like Vladimir Ashkenazy or somebody way back then, getting all dressed up and everything, and then going to dinner afterwards. And we went to Chinatown. And I remember going to this restaurant that you would hardly know was there. You go down some steps, go into the small like dining room, and it's just like purely authentic Chinese food. Like I could never order it because it's all pretty much in Chinese. And so they would order all of this sort of, to me, exotic food like squab or whatever. But I have such a nice memory of it. And when I came here when I was older and grown up, I went looking for that restaurant, but there's no way I could. I mean, it probably would have closed anyway. It was so long ago. But I'm always looking for those authentic places because it's just so much fun. But
well, if you're in DC, not too far away from here is Da Hung Pao, which is a dim sum restaurant, which is still it's not in Chinatown.
Right.
It's on 14th Street.
Right. I think I actually have been there.
But the other issue that's driving the exodus from Chinatowns is just the latest generation they don't necessarily want to keep running their family businesses,
Right,
you know, so
right,
they're off doing other things,
right,
or they don't want to necessarily
right,
live in Chinatown themselves. But
right.
that's a whole topic.
Yeah, I
that we
know.
can get
Yeah,
very deep
it
into.
is. So, okay. Well, I actually had put together a couple of what I called rapid fire questions
boy.
for you. And I did not let you see those ahead of time because I
Okay.
thought it would be fun. So if you're ready for that,
Oh boy. Okay.
let's have some fun. Your favorite place you like to visit when you go to William and Mary's campus?
Probably Crimdale.
Okay, that's very classic. Favorite restaurant in Williamsburg?
Favorite restaurant in Williamsburg is no longer there.
What was
But
it?
it was Kyoto. It was
Really?
a teppanyaki restaurant.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
even. Okay.
I'm pretty sure we put that the owner's son through college just from our visits.
Oh,
So,
really? Yeah. Is that when you were in school?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Mr. Johnson.
Where was it?
It was off of I'm drawing. It's sort of like around the corner from College Deli.
Oh, okay. I think
You know, there's like a piece of property. It's like on a weird triangle back
where
there.
the bookstore is now?
Maybe.
Okay, I don't know.
One thing about Williamsburg is I barely recognize
I
some
know,
parts
it
of it
changes
because
so
it's changing.
much.
Yeah.
It does change. Okay, so favorite type of food or foods that you like to indulge in?
Well, you know, once made the mistake of saying to my father that my favorite food was Indian food.
Oh, no.
And, you know, I'm in my 50s now, and I think even recently I heard my father say, since Indian food is your favorite food, this or that. So,
He never forgot, did he?
yes, I do love Chinese food, but let's just say I love Asian food. Now that I'm working towards an Asian museum, I'll just say, I'll just diplomatically say Asian.
Okay, that's good. So this is sort of a funny question. Do you have the ALDH2 deficiency, which is where you get flushed when you drink
Yes.
alcohol? You do?
Yes, which
I do too.
I guess I shouldn't say for our teenage viewers,
Oh,
but
okay, well,
that's
you know.
that's a tough thing when you're in high school and
It
you might-
is.
you-
Everyone thought I'd been in
can't-
the sun all day. I'm
well, I was
like,
going to say you can't get away with having a few
Yeah, you
drinks
can't
and
get
then
away
going
with
home.
it. No, that's true. Favorite thing you like to do to relax?
Sailing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. Where do you sail? Well, obviously
So
you're in
I
Annapolis.
yeah,
so-
I don't know if it came out earlier, but I live in Annapolis. I commute into DC.
Oh, okay.
that's
So
sort
that
of-
you can go sailing?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. I didn't say your favorite book, but a favorite book.
I think my favorite book that I've ever read is the Poisonwood Bible. Have you
Oh,
ever?
yeah,
ever
I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
it's very good.
Barbara Kingsolver?
Yeah.
Is that right? Or not? It's not right. Can't remember.
Yes, I think maybe that is
Something like
right.
that.
Yeah.
I've heard of that. Mhm.
And as far as like on topic, you know, I think one of the best books about Asian American history is there's a book called Chinese in America,
Oh,
and it does delve into other Asian groups, but it's very well written. It's a good
Okay.
primer
okay.
for Asian American history.
To learn some
Yeah.
history. Okay. A favorite movie?
I
That's
could
hard.
hear I could almost see my wife cringing, but my favorite movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, I like that one too. A favorite type of music and or song?
My favorite type of music is rock.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Favorite sports team?
Nationals.
Okay. Very classic DC. Favorite foreign country you visited and why?
Favorite foreign country. Maybe Japan.
Oh,
Yeah.
why?
Well, I think it's been a while since I was kind of young when we went there, but you know, at that time, it just seemed very futuristic.
Oh,
And yeah, you know, Hong Kong now is sort of what Japan used to be, and well, really every major city in China. So you know, bullet trains, things like that.
yeah. No, it's very cool. Favorite place you like to visit when you're in Washington D.C.?
Oh, I like Dumbarton Oaks. Have you ever you
Yeah,
ever go
yeah.
there?
It's beautiful. I haven't actually gone in. I'm always outside looking.
the Library of Congress,
It's beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Rock Creek Park.
yeah, yeah. That's the great choices. Favorite part of your job?
Well, I'm only 8 days into this
Well,
job.
right. I mean, you can
But,
maybe pick the previous
I
job.
think, when you see that how happy and emotional people get by representing them, giving them visibility, I think, that's when you realize what this job really is
The
about.
meaning,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
meaningfulness, yeah. Okay, what is a fun fact about yourself that most of your friends wouldn't know? That might be a little dangerous, I'm not sure, but
I don't really know. They don't know. I'm pretty open book.
okay, well, that's fair. So I think we have a few minutes left, and I was going to try to take a couple of questions from the Q&A, and I'm going to butcher this name. It says Duct Lee 94 mentions that there were Asian students groups on campus by early 1990s, because we were talking about
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
People can't necessarily figure out what I am, so maybe they didn't
Right,
approach me
right,
to-
right. I have
okay.
the same issue actually, because I'm half Chinese myself. So, let's see. Talk about the importance of student groups creating change.
You know, not only William and Mary, like I was saying, how I was so impressed with the Asian Centennial.
Right.
Even schools that don't necessarily have an Asian American studies curriculum, you really can sense that there's just an increased level of activism
Right.
and
Right.
cultural awareness, and
Yeah, it's nice to see.
you see that
actually.
on really every campus.
Right, right. So here's another question. What would you do if you could wave a magic wand and change something that you think would be, or make something happen, with regard to, I don't know, what we've been talking about generally?
Well, I don't know if I want to wave a magic wand,
Right.
because I feel like until people kind of struggle through reaching equality, they're not going to learn the real path to equality.
Like why they're there.
Yeah, and you hope it goes faster.
Right.
But
right.
you can't make people think a certain way or see a certain way.
Right.
I think you really just have to be patient and understanding and forgiving.
Right.
But I will use that magic wand to raise $1 billion to
Right,
bring this
to get
museum
this museum going.
place.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, that's really great. Okay, do we have any more questions? I'm looking over here to like my host if there's anything. Okay. Let's see. Here's another question. What do you hope to see in the future for our APIM community?
Well, I think I would like to see, and I think we are already seeing it, but, young children to be proud of who they are, and to, not have any hindrance in terms of their opportunities. And, I think it's not just for Asians or Asian children. I think it's for all people,
Right.
I think it's for women's issues, for LGBTQ
Right.
issues,
For everyone,
for
really.
everyone, really, yeah.
No, that makes sense.
And I hope that we reach. We're entering a new era where hate is not a political tactic.
Right. That would be great. So going back a little bit, we'd mentioned this earlier. Can you tell me about the Asian Centennial Award that you received? Like what was that for? I mean, what did you feel about that? Like, what was that like? You
Yeah,
said the ceremonies were beautiful. You were surprised that there was so much like effort being put forward towards that.
I don't know the number of people, but there was a large group of people
Right.
that received that award with me. And it was incredible hearing their stories because a lot of them had spent their entire careers, on DEI issues
Right, right,
and
right.
diversity, equity, inclusion. And I felt a little guilty just because I had only been working on this museum project for like 4 or 5 years.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, it was incredible. It was also just eye-opening. I talked to the president, President Rowe,
Oh, uh-huh.
and just her vision for not just having this to be like one day of celebration, but really continuing
Right, sort of for the year,
the
like kind of
topics
celebrating.
and the celebrations and also I also learned about the early Asian students, which there were quite some
Really
time ago. Yeah,
interesting.
right,
Right,
right.
right, right. No, so with regard to that, someone wanted me to make sure I said that from 2021 to 2022, William and Mary celebrated the Asian Centennial commemorating the admission of Chen Pu Kao, our first student from 1923,
1920.
our first student from Asia, and highlighted the contribution of the preceding generations of students of Asian, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern descent. This auspicious milestone gave the William and Mary community an opportunity, like you're saying, to reflect on the onset of inclusion amidst the overwhelming exclusion of African Americans from matriculating in the university. And so we now actually have, an African American memorial that I've seen on campus. It's beautiful, actually.
It's
So,
events like that they just make you realize there are people that they might be from decades ago even, but people that have really paved the way
right,
for the kind of change that you're seeing today.
right, right,
And I think that's one of the things that, in these museums that we're talking about that we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate, people that are real heroes, people that are real trailblazers.
right.
Not just because they're Asian American or African American,
right,
but just,
right.
they're American stories
Right.
that could be in any museum, but,
Right.
we choose to focus. One thing, people might ask, why do we need an Asian American museum? And, if you do an audit of the entire Smithsonian system, you're going to be hard pressed to find any Asian American stories. There are probably a lot of objects in the collection that could help tell that story.
Right,
There are definitely stories to tell.
right,
But, until you have a museum that is focusing on that, they're just buried.
right,
They're in, these are objects and these are stories that are
Right.
in warehouses
right,
in suburban DC.
right,
They're not part of this whole story that all these museums piece together.
right, right. And they're not in the school books, the textbooks
Yeah,
necessarily
that's a whole
either.
nother effort.
I know, that's a whole,
And,
yeah.
I think museums have a big role to play in that because they're able to create a lot of these, a lot of the material and fodder for,
Right,
but you can't just walk up to a school system and just insert it in. There's a whole fight to be had
Right.
to get it into the curriculum.
right. Is there going to be an element of public contributions to the new museum?
Right. So the idea is that this congressional study is going to be very detailed. It's going to spell out the different scenarios and also detail a business model even for the
Okay.
museum. The funding you would expect, just looking at other similar museums, where half of the funding would be from the appropriations tied to the authorization from Congress, and the other half would be from the private sector.
Right, right. Well, I have something for that Asian museum if it happens, actually. My mother's kimono from Japan
Oh,
from about
yeah.
1940s. So I'm ready whenever you guys are ready.
Yeah, and it's not the dress itself, that is the only thing. It's the story
Right.
about what that meant to you as an American, as an immigrant, or
Right.
how is it? Why is that something
And
that's
wanting
cherished?
to be able to share it, because this particular kimono has been in a trunk for like 60 years,
Yeah.
basically. I mean, ever since she came over from Japan. This beautiful kimono. But anyway, so it would be really nice to hear all of these stories, right, from all of the different people who have come to the U.S. and they have all of these sort of items that they maybe brought with them that will help tell their
Yeah,
stories, right?
like a sort of a personal treasures.
Right,
Yeah, at the Chinese American Museum, we had a Qipao dress
right. I saw that exhibit actually.
and
Yes.
that is just an opportunity for people to talk about not just a dress or a fashion, but
Right,
also
right.
like what role did that
Right, in their
that
lives.
artwork
Right,
play in their lives? Yeah.
right, right. Um, so is there another sort of hero or person that you've learned about since like the Asian Chinese American Museum and everything that maybe we wouldn't know about that you could speak about?
Wow. You know, there are people like Wong Kim Ark who really became like one of the first Chinese advocates for the civil rights of Chinese Americans, or not even Americans at that time.
Right, right, right.
And this is in the 1800s.
Wow, yeah.
And you think what what bravery it would
Right.
take to be fighting these civil rights battles
Back then.
when every person you met had probably never even seen an Asian person.
Right,
Right.
right.
I think that of the early Asian students at William and Mary. What was it like to be in a country where
Right.
there was no one like you,
Right.
and you
Right,
were scrambling to blend in?
right. Okay, someone handed me a question. What is the current status of APIM at the National Mall project? Like, I'm not sure.
Okay, so this museum project is so it started with the bill that President Biden signed in 22.
Right,
That was the work product. The reason why there was a bill on the floor that he signed, passed through the Senate as well, was from Grace Mung, Representative Grace Mung in New York, who worked very hard to get that bill
right.
signed. One way that it was pushed through a little bit smoother was the commission normally for these museums would be funded.
Right.
So they're unfunded. So that's part of what we're doing. We're trying to raise the funds
Okay.
for the study, for the effort
Right.
to get you to the report.
Right.
The report will happen probably, so the commission will meet. We've been waiting a while for this commission to be finalized.
Right.
So now
You mean
it
the
is.
people on the
Yeah,
commission?
this 8-person
Okay.
commission. And their report is due 18 months after they convene for the first time in September.
I see.
So after that, we would hope that by 2027, it could be authorized in Congress. So, a report is put out, bills are proposed, they float around for a long time.
Right.
And then in 27, we would hope that we would have authorization.
Right.
And then that's a little bit more of a magic number after that. How long would a museum take to break ground? It
Right.
would really depend on a lot of factors.
Right.
For instance, like if we use an existing building versus,
Right. That makes a big difference.
carving out a new plot of land and
and
putting a
starting
new
from
building.
scratch. Right.
If you haven't noticed, the mall is getting pretty crowded.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
That's why I wondered, like, where
Yeah.
would it
Just put it right
possibly
in the
go?
middle,
Yeah, there
right in
you
the
go.
middle of the
There
mall.
you go. So
So I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered the question, but that's
yeah.
basically the progress.
So do you think well, I mean, we sort of talked about American Studies program. So William and Mary even now has, I mean, I remember when I went to William and Mary, I would have loved it if they had taught Japanese or even Mandarin. I
Yeah.
don't think they had either.
I think the closest you probably had was Asian art,
Right.
you know?
Right. Muscarella was there, I think, when I was there.
Yeah.
So the newer Muscarella way back when.
Well, and you know, that makes me think how, you know, some people say, oh, there's already an Asian museum in
Right,
DC. You know, they
right,
think
right.
of the formerly Freer Sackville,
Right,
now it's
right.
the National Museum of Asian Art. But
Oh,
there are
they
two
changed
things.
the name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We won't tell that story.
I actually wondered about that, but anyway, okay.
So,
yeah.
So that museum is not only not Asian American, but it's also just focusing on art.
Right.
So, you know,
It's not telling about other parts of
the
people's
future
lives.
Asian American Museum will probably feature some Asian American artists,
Right.
but it's not gonna have an art focus, you know,
Okay, I
necessarily. It's
see.
gonna be
I see.
balanced on different, you know,
Right.
disciplines.
Right. So would it be sort of similar to like telling the story of like in the African American Museum, like sort
Yeah.
of the Asian
Yeah, I mean,
American
I
sort of
think you're gonna
stories?
have stories that are hard to tell,
Right.
you know, or
right,
difficult
right,
to hear.
Right. Very
You're going to have stories of triumph and innovation,
right.
perseverance, achievement,
Right.
visibility. You know, I think you could have a lot of that museum really just talk about not necessarily famous people, but, you know, you reflecting on yourself.
Right.
Again, regardless of whether you're Asian or not, you know, I think
Right.
that it should speak to all groups.
Right. Oh, I
But,
agree.
you know, I've likened, you know, doing this kind of work as like holding up a mirror, you know, to someone. You know, you could see yourself, you could turn it, you could see other things. But if you look at
Right.
that, you know, you should look into that mirror, and it should apply to anyone,
Right.
that, hey, this is what an American looks like.
Right.
You know,
right.
you see that mirror and you only see yourself, and you shouldn't doubt for a second that you are as American as anyone else,
Right.
you know?
Right. Okay. Well, I think we're coming to the close here of about an hour.
I survived the rapid fire question.
Yes, you definitely survived them.
I may have
I loved that
I may
part,
have
actually.
circumvented one.
No, you're fine. But I did want to take a minute for the audience to just say that if you're interested in the APIM Alumni Advisory Board and in our events, which we are starting to do more, please visit William and Mary's website or Instagram page. There are 15 board members currently on this board of Asian, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern heritage, all of us. And this board was started in November of 2022. And our mission is to honor and explore our diversity in order to bridge alumni and cultivating a vibrant community where all APIM alumni belong. We want to help ensure that APIM faces and voices are a core component of William and Mary's present and future identity. Thank you so much,
thank
David,
you.
for coming and talking with us.
And thank you to McGuire Woods too.
Yeah,
for
yes, thank
our
you,
lovely
McGuire
room, yeah.
Woods. Thank you, McGuire Woods. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to share this talk with us. We look forward to future conversations.